A quiet Friday morning. The 42nd floor of the Apex marketing building was bathed in early sunlight. The atmosphere felt lighter than usual because today was the Friday before Labor Day weekend and most employees had opted to work remotely. But that emptiness created the perfect stage for a deliberate act of humiliation. Inside a glass-walled conference room where sunlight reflected off the table like the surface of a still lake, Kayla Morgan was carefully arranging folders for the upcoming shareholder presentation. She was the new data analyst, 26 years old, born and raised in the Bronx with an honors degree from Rutgers University. Intelligent eyes, tightly coiled hair pulled into a neat bun, and a modest, composed demeanor. But what made her stand out the most was also what made her a target: her brown skin and a stillness so poised it unsettled a workplace full of pre-selected faces. The door burst open. Rachel Simmons stepped in, wearing a pristine white blazer dress, a mocking smile, and a cold can of Coca-Cola. Travis Reed trailed closely behind her, recording her phone while Lindsay Park scrolled on her own phone, giggling. "Well," Rachel roared, "looks like you're getting your little low-budget ideas ready for the meeting." Kayla looked up, no reaction. In a single moment, the can of Coca-Cola popped open and the dark liquid poured straight onto her head, running down the crisp navy blouse she had ironed the night before. The fizz bubbled across the white stone floor, leaving a dirty trail, like a smear of contempt deliberately exposed. "Oops," Rachel smirked. "Guess your ideas needed a little refreshment." Laughter burst from Travis and Lindsay, followed by screenshots being taken. "Hey everyone!" Travis shouted, "the company's diversity initiative is getting a Coke bath." And so the laughter blended into a chilling silence. No one in the office dared intervene. A few peeked through the glass walls, some bowed their heads and pretended to be busy. But all were silent, as if this humiliation was just business as usual. Kayla said nothing. She remained still, droplets falling from her hair onto the now-stained report folders. But in her eyes, there were no tears. Only one thing Rachel could never read: preparation. She picked up her phone. Her fingers moved quickly, sending a brief message. No one noticed the Patek Philippe watch under her sleeve or the subtle sparkle of a delicate wedding ring. But Kayla knew. In precisely 15 minutes, the wheels would begin to turn, and those laughing the hardest now would soon be the ones trembling the most. "Calling your mom to come clean this up," Travis sneered, still pointing his phone at Kayla. "Or maybe call your Uber boyfriend to come comfort you," Lindsay chimed in, giggling non-stop like this was a comedy show. Rachel crossed her arms and stood squarely before Kayla, her red-painted lips curling into a triumphant smirk. "You think a public university degree is enough to sit at the same table as us?" The question wasn't meant to be answered. Rachel knew she didn't need one. The distance between them had already been decided for her by bloodline, skin color, and the phone calls her parents could make with a single tap. Kayla slowly bent down, picked up a napkin, and dabbed at the Coca-Cola dripping from her chin. Everything she did was deliberate, almost unnervingly calm. It wasn't a submission, it was absolute control. She glanced at her phone. The screen lit up with 2 messages: "Ready, 15 minutes, executive elevator in motion." Kayla closed her phone and placed it back on the table. For the first time since joining Apex, she smiled. Not a polite smile, not a mocking one, but the smile of someone who had just placed the final piece of a long-awaited plan. Rachel faltered slightly, her expression stiffening. Kayla's silence was more unsettling than any comeback. "What are you smiling at?" Rachel asked, a note of unease in her voice. Kayla raised her head, her eyes no longer avoiding contact. In them, there was something Rachel had never seen in any employee here before, unwavering belief in something far greater than this room. "You just made the most important decision of your life," Kayla replied softly, without a hint of malice. "And you don't even know it." No one understood what she meant, but suddenly the air felt heavier, thicker. Travis shut off his camera, glancing at Rachel as if to say, "What the hell is happening?" Lindsay is always good at reading faces. She furrowed her brow. How Kayla stood tall in the puddle of soda on the floor made her uneasy. Like a storm was about to hit, no one in the room had an umbrella. And then ding! A small chime from the VIP elevator, the one regular staff weren't allowed to use, echoed through the floor, slicing through the oppressive silence. Everyone turned. A red light flashed on the panel access level executive. The elevator doors slowly parted. 3 men in black suits stepped out of the first security. Behind them, a tall man in a charcoal Tom Ford suit walked into the room with a presence that froze the air. Ethan Blake. From that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. The room went still as Ethan Blake entered. His silver hair was slicked back with seasoned precision, his sharp eyes as cold as if he had just walked out of a global strategy meeting. The Tom Ford suit hugged his broad frame, and each footstep echoed off the stone floor like metal tapping glass. But what truly made Rachel Simmons go pale wasn't his powerful appearance. It was the way he looked at Kayla. No questions, no explanations. Just a look of complete understanding, as if he had known everything all along, and had waited for the exact moment to appear. Ethan spoke in a deep, precise voice, sharp as a scalpel. "You all right, just 3 words." But everyone in the room, including those uninvolved, felt the full weight of authority hit the floor instantly. Rachel swallowed hard. She stepped back half a pace, as if trying to dissolve into the air. "Excuse me, this is a staff area." "Who are you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite her trembling hands. Ethan turned to Rachel for the first time. His gaze carried no anger, just a truth so cold it bordered on despair. "This is not a staff area," he said slowly. "This property is directly owned by Blake & Co., where I'm the CEO and the principal shareholder of Apex Marketing." Lindsay dropped her phone. Travis stood frozen, his face pale as if the blood had drained from it. Rachel blinked. "You? What did you just say?" Ethan no longer answered her. He walked up to Kayla, pulled a handkerchief from his breast pocket, and gently wiped the remaining Coca-Cola from his wife's shirt collar. "Security," he said, eyes still locked on Kayla. "Remove these 3 from the building, immediately." Lindsay reacted first. "Wait, you can't do this. We're management, and she's just what?" Kayla spoke up for the first time since Ethan had entered. Her voice was soft like a breeze, but cut through Lindsay's words like a blade. "Just a black employee you thought would stay silent forever." Travis had stopped filming. He looked around the room, seemingly hoping someone would back him up. No one dared. Rachel screamed one last time, desperate to salvage some dignity. "Wait, she's our employee. You can't just..." Ethan turned a faint, cold smile touching his lips. "You're mistaken, Rachel. She's not your employee. She's Kayla Morgan Blake, my wife. And the woman you chose to humiliate today is the person who helped me design the multi-million-dollar AI system your company relies on daily without even knowing it." The entire office imploded in silence. No one dared breathe. A few employees started backing into the walls, trying to avoid Ethan's gaze. Kayla didn't move. She wasn't proud. She wasn't smug. She was calm, the kind that comes only from someone who has endured long enough to know that real victories don't require shouting. And now Ethan said, turning to the security team, "Their journey with this company ends." The silence in the room was no longer about fear. It was about the collapse of belief in what they thought was reality. They, the people who had once felt entitled to judge, mock, and humiliate, were now facing something they had never imagined. The person they had always dismissed was in fact the center of a power they could never reach. Rachel tried to push back, though her voice trembled. So, if she's Ethan Blake's wife, why is she working here? Playing poorly, running a scam? Kayla turned to her for the first time with the eyes of someone who had surpassed every limit of patience. She wasn't angry. She was amused. "I didn't come here to play poor Rachel," she said, each word clear and deliberate, like teaching a child their first lesson in dignity. "I came to work, to prove I could stand as an equal, without needing the name Blake." The entire office was stunned. All this time, the quiet black woman who stayed late in the corner, ate lunch alone, never joined the elite networking circles, was the wife of a man who could buy out the entire company with just 2 weeks of investment profits. Ethan nodded slightly and added, "She graduated summa cum laude in data science from Rutgers, applied here on her own, submitted her resume without using any connections. She wanted to prove that a woman of color could walk through any door without someone opening it for her. A slap without sound, a lesson without chalk." "And what did you do?" Ethan asked, looking at Rachel, Travis, and Lindsay. "You dumped Coca-Cola on a data expert who's quietly been building an AI system that will transform the entire digital marketing industry. Right here in this office." Kayla silently opened her laptop. The interface for Prometheus, the predictive market analysis system she had developed using machine learning, appeared on the screen. A small caption beneath it read, "Inventor Kayla Morgan Blake. Registered patent number 8804971. The entire room held its breath. Even the uninvolved employees, those who once laughed casually or stayed quiet for comfort, now felt their blood rushing to their faces. Lindsay whispered, "No way. She's the one who built that system." Kayla turned to her, gaze unwavering. "While you all gossiped about my skin color, mocked my clothes, and pretended to be busy every time I spoke, I spent night after night here rewriting the entire company's data architecture. And you thought I was weak? Just because I didn't scream." She shook her head gently. "You were very, very wrong." The conference room door opened again. No introductions, no grand entrances, just a tall, middle-aged man with silver-rimmed glasses walking in with the calm of someone used to facing people who thought the law was just a game. Jared Cole, Chief Legal Officer of Blake & Company, also officiated Kayla and Ethan's wedding 3 years prior. He placed a leather briefcase on the table, very lightly. But the sound it made as it touched the glass landed like a verdict. Rachel swallowed hard, trying to summon some of her former arrogance. "Oh, so what now? You're going to sue us for spilling Coca-Cola?" Jared adjusted his glasses and gently opened the case. He didn't say a word, just pulled out 3 thick folders, each with a name clearly labeled. Rachel Simmons, Travis Reed, Lindsay Park. Under each name a chilling title, documented evidence. Ethical harassment, racial discrimination, hostile work environment. "We're not suing over Coca-Cola," Jared said, his voice slow and steady, like a hammer striking stone. "We're suing because for 6 consecutive months you engaged in systematic acts of isolation, humiliation, and discrimination solely because she is black." Travis's mouth fell open. "She never even filed a complaint. She never said anything." Kayla responded without raising her voice. "I didn't speak. I recorded." Jared held up a USB drive containing 47 audio recordings of meetings where her ideas were stolen, 13 internal emails with discriminatory content, Security camera footage clearly shows unequal treatment between Kayla and the other staff. Messages from a chat group called, "Let me get this right, Elite Apex." Travis's face went white. Lindsay let out a soft gasp, her hands gripping her phone tightly. But Jared wasn't finished. Oh, and also a social media post with the caption, "When the quota has no friends," along with candid photos of her eating lunch alone. The entire HR department will receive full copies. Rachel's face flushed deep red. She screamed, "This is defamation. This violates privacy." Ethan, who had remained silent until now, smiled faintly. Kind of like how you sent internal emails with subject lines like, "Wanna bet how long she lasts before she runs back to the ghetto?" Kayla stood. All eyes turned to her. She didn't bring power into the room. She was the power. "You thought that because I'm from the Bronx, my dad was a bus driver and my mum a nurse, I would bow my head." She looked at each person. Not one dared meet her gaze. "But while you wasted time laughing, I rewrote this company's entire data infrastructure." She pressed a button. The screen behind her lit up Project Prometheus, predictive AI system for marketing efficiency, inventor Kayla Morgan Blake, patent number 88049771, estimated value $47,000. The room descended into utter silence. Rachel nearly collapsed. Travis pulled at his hair. Lindsay glanced around, desperate for support from nearby co-workers, but all she received were averted eyes. Jared calmly closed the briefcase. "With all the evidence presented, you are now facing criminal charges. In the state of New York, creating a racially hostile work environment is punishable by up to 5 years in prison." But that he added isn't even the end. A soft ding echoed from the intercom system. After a few seconds of hesitation, the receptionist said, "All employees, please proceed to the main auditorium on the 43rd floor. This is an emergency all-hands meeting." Less than 10 minutes later, Apex Marketing's main auditorium, usually reserved for celebrations and shareholder briefings, was packed. No one knew exactly what was happening, but the tense faces of senior leadership and the conspicuous absence of Rachel, Travis, and Lindsay said everything. Ethan stood in the front row with Jared Cole. Beside them, Kayla Morgan Blake, no longer just the new black hire, stood as the woman about to dismantle a rotten system with evidence crafted by her oppressors themselves. The lights dimmed. The giant LED screen behind the stage lit up. The first title appeared in white font on a black background: Special File Apex Marketing versus Kayla Morgan Blake, 6 months of discrimination, 1 minute of reckoning. A video began to play. Rachel stood before Kayla, eyes filled with malice, and accidentally dumped an entire can of Coca-Cola over her head. Travis's voice rang out in the footage. "Look at that. The company's diversity campaign is getting a Coke shower." Lindsay's shrill laughter followed. "That's what you get when you hire to meet a quota." In the auditorium, no one laughed, not a single person. Some looked down, some turned red with shame. A few young employees wiped away tears, not out of surprise, but because they had seen it happen and said nothing. The video continued. On-screen messages from the secret chat group, Elite Apex, appeared. Phrases like, "How long before she runs back to the ghetto?" "Assigning her work is like throwing it into a blender." "Looks like the maid took a wrong turn." A new slide appeared. Internal email from Rachel Simmons. "Diversity is fine, but let's not turn it into mobile decor. She sits in the same meeting room, and I feel like I'm doing charity." The entire auditorium felt like it had been struck by lightning. No more whispers, no awkward laughs, only a wave of collective shame. Jared stepped onto the stage and composed, For the past 6 months, you have witnessed or chosen to ignore a series of actions constituting severe ethical violations that may be criminally prosecutable. He raised the same USB stick. All evidence, video, audio, emails, internal chats, social media screenshots have been submitted to legal HR and the entire board of shareholders. A beep sounded. The following slide appeared. Patent 880491 Prometheus. Market Analytics AI System. Sole inventor Kayla Morgan Blake. Estimated valuation 47,000. Rights assigned exclusively to Blake & Co. The room stirred. A few senior execs exchanged glances of shock and embarrassment. Ethan stepped forward, voice cold and clear. Starting today, all profits from the Prometheus project, which some of you once mocked as a public university idea, will go toward establishing the Kayla Morgan Scholarship Fund for young women of color in tech. Travis, Lindsay, and Rachel were now trembling in the back row. The entire auditorium turned to look at them. Ethan continued, and those three will be the fund's first sponsors, with their revoked shares penalties and the reputational damage they've caused. All eyes turned to Kayla. She stepped onto the stage. There was no power being asserted. Only the calm voice of a woman who had walked the long road of endurance and decided not to remain silent one day longer. You used to ask why I worked here if I was Ethan Blake's wife. The answer is, I believe in proving myself. But today, I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to end a system that caused thousands like me to quit before we even began. The first clap came hesitantly, but like dominoes it spread across the auditorium. It was not applause out of politeness, but of release, atonement, and gratitude from those who had once stayed quiet, once doubted, and now realized. They were witnessing history. Kayla stepped back, letting the stage lights cast fully onto the LED screen behind her. A new slide appeared. Corporate Diversity and Equity Reform Policy. Effective. Next week, with legal support from Blake & Company oversight by Kayla Morgan, Blake, appointed head of the Corporate Cultural Innovation Council. In the front row, senior board members began to murmur. A few nodded solemnly. Some, especially those who had once dismissed diversity in leadership, swallowed hard as they saw their names crossed off in the next slide. Jared Cole stepped up. To enforce real change, we have submitted a formal petition to the board of directors requesting the dismissal of anyone who ignored complaints, covered misconduct, and failed to enact reform over the past 18 months. 3 names appeared in red-bordered frames. Robert Klein, Deputy CEO. Sarah Donnelly, Head of HR. Greg Walters, Director of Strategy, each with a caption, ignored internal reports, failed to act on evidence, complicit through silence. Ethan declared, Blake & Company will acquire most of the remaining shares within 48 hours. From today onward, all employment promotions and hiring within Apex and all Blake & Company subsidiaries will be subject to an independent equity audit conducted by a third party. The entire auditorium held its breath. Next slide, Diversity Audit Center, powered by Equihire AI System. Developer Kayla Morgan Blake. Status deployed in 12 global partner firms. A young employee whispered aloud, Equihire. That's the fairness-checking software Google is piloting, right? Kayla nodded, smiling for the first time. Exactly. And starting next week, it will reassess Apex's entire internal framework. No more hiring by fancy resumes or culture fit alone. It will be based on competence, behavior, and true contribution. Still shaking, Lindsay grasped for one last sliver of hope. We can make this right. I can apologize. Kayla looked at her as though seeing through the melting mascara on her face. "You had 6 months to make it right. Instead, you filmed me eating lunch alone and posted it online with the caption, 'When quotas have no friends.'" There was nothing more to say. Jared presented the final document, termination notice for cause without severance. Rachel Simmons, Travis Reed, Lindsay Park, all shares were revoked. Internal system access was terminated, and the legal dossier was sent to the New York State Department of Labor. The door closed not just behind them, but behind an entire era of toxicity. Kayla didn't watch as the three were escorted out by security. Instead, she looked at Daniel Lee, the IT engineer who once stood up and told the truth in a board meeting. "Daniel," she said, "you will lead the Equihire implementation team at Apex. I believe in those who stand up, even when they stand alone." He nodded, choking back emotion. Kayla turned back to face the auditorium not as a new CEO, but as a woman who had turned pain into strategy and strategy into change. 6 months later, the Metropolitan Opera House in New York gleamed under the spotlight of the most anticipated documentary premiere of the year. Code Kayla: From Discrimination to Revolution. From the limousines pulling up to the red carpet, film stars, Fortune 500 CEOs, and those who had once stayed silent in the Apex auditorium now arrived to witness the very reckoning they had inadvertently helped spark, even if just through a glance of regret. In the center of the grand hall, a digital board displayed the numbers that had rewritten history. Kayla Morgan Foundation scholarships awarded 347 full scholarships for young women of color in technology. Equihire project deployed in 1 to 200 companies worldwide. Prometheus AI system Q1 revenue £180,000, all profits reinvested into social equity initiatives. On stage, Kayla Morgan Blake appeared in a simple black Armani suit. The spotlight didn't outshine her presence, it only highlighted the freedom in every step she took. She no longer needed to impress, because now she chose how to exist on her terms. "Someone once asked me," Kayla began, "why I didn't react when Coca-Cola was poured over my head. I told them, when your dignity is stripped in front of a crowded room, you have 2 choices. 1, react immediately and satisfy your ego. 2, stay silent. Take 1 step back and build a machine that will dismantle the entire system that humiliated you." The entire room rose to its feet in thunderous applause. Cameras panned across tear-streaked faces, students who had grown up in marginalized neighborhoods, now attending MIT, Stanford, and Harvard, thanks to the Kayla Morgan Scholarship. Among them was a 15-year-old girl named Ariana Lopez, the first in her family to learn programming, and one of many whom Kayla mentored every Sunday night via Zoom. Then, a moment no one would forget. An older man with salt and pepper hair, dressed in a well-pressed but aged suit, was invited onto the stage. Marcus Morgan, Kayla's father, drove a bus in the Bronx for 40 years to get his daughter to school on time. In his hands was the Nobel Peace Prize, recently awarded to Kayla for her technological innovations in social equity. For the first time, a black woman had received such an honor. His voice trembled. "All my life, people only saw the color of my daughter's skin, but today the whole world sees her mind and her heart." After the premiere, the story spread across the globe. The Kayla effect became an academic term at prestigious universities, used to describe the phenomenon when injustice is personalized but resisted with systemic power. In economics courses, she was dubbed the Rosa Parks of 21st century tech. In a closing scene of the documentary, an interview was shown in which Rachel Simmons, who had dumped Coca-Cola on Kayla, tried to defend herself in a minor podcast. She said, "I lost everything over a silly joke." The most shared comment under the video: "No, you lost everything because you didn't believe others had the right to have it like you did." One spring evening, Kayla was working late in her new office on the top floor of Blake & Co. when she received a message from an unknown number. "Ms. Kayla, my name is Liana from Detroit. I just got your scholarship. I'm the first in my family to have a laptop. I promise I won't waste this chance. Thank you for not walking away that day." Kayla smiled. She didn't reply immediately. She quietly stood up and gazed out over the city lights below. In her mind echoed the very words she had once said on that fateful afternoon. "You just made the most important decision of your life, but not in the way you think." 12 months after the emergency meeting at Apex, the tech industry called it a moral reset. The media dubbed it the Kayla Quake. But to those who had lived in the shadow of discrimination, it was simply the first door that finally opened. In Silicon Valley, corporations like Microsoft, Google, and Apple began adopting equihire as a mandatory standard in their global hiring protocols. Over 37,000 resumes were re-evaluated, not based on GPA or alma mater, but on intangible factors such as systems that filtered out unfamiliar names, negative bias toward profile photos of people of color, prejudice against women, applicants with Southern accents. One HR director was removed from a hiring board after an internal email surfaced stating, "Don't hire another Kayla. One rule breaker is enough." Kayla did not comment. She smiled softly when asked by the press. They were wrong. "We're not just one, we are an entire generation waiting to be seen." In universities and policy schools, the Kayla effect became a required case study in labor law sociology and corporate governance courses. Wharton launched a full seminar titled "The Architecture of Silence: Ethical Systems" through the case of Kayla Morgan Blake. Many students spoke up for the first time about professors' gender or racial bias because now they knew someone had done it before and wasn't crushed for it but became a symbol. And what about those who once humiliated her? Once a proud female executive, Rachel Simmons now lived in a small rented apartment in suburban Illinois. After 23 job rejections, she began editing for a barely known podcast where she tried to reframe the incident as a misunderstanding. A clip of her crying went viral. "It was just a joke. I lost everything over a can of Coke." It became a global meme. Caption: "It wasn't the Coke, it was a worldview as toxic as the drink itself." Travis Reed, who once filmed Kayla's humiliation, now worked as a delivery driver for the app he used to mock. He tried to change his name on job platforms, but every tech recruiter had already received the racial conduct dossier circulated by the Kayla Morgan Foundation. Lindsay Park, a former HR assistant, moved back in with her parents in Oregon. She deleted all her social media accounts and sent an apology email to Kayla via the company, but she never received a reply. Some apologies come too late, not meant for the victim, but to soothe the guilt of the guilty. Kayla was different. She didn't spend her time looking back in bitterness. She built a global scholarship network, expanding into Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. Poor young girls who once didn't dare dream of owning a laptop now sat in AI labs beside a small label on each screen, funded by the Kayla Morgan Initiative. She also founded an ethics watchdog organization, helping companies rebuild internal cultures. At the launch, she said, "I didn't create this organization to get people fired. I created it so talented individuals don't lose opportunities just because they were born with the wrong skin color." One early winter evening, Kayla returned to visit her old high school in the Bronx. Students rushed out to greet her. One brought a handwritten essay about her titled "The Woman Who Turned Silence into an Operating System." The principal handed her the school's honorary key. "Any words for the next generation?" he asked. Kayla paused for a few seconds, then said, "When they make you sit at a lower table, don't flip it. Quietly build the entire building and invite them to learn from the start." A regular morning in mid-December, Kayla sat in her office at the top floor of Blake & Company. Winter sunlight streamed through the glass, falling across framed memories, the Nobel Prize ceremony photo, the Prometheus patent certificate, a handwritten letter from a former U.S. president, and at the center, a simple picture of her standing in the Apex auditorium, bruise still stained brown from Coca-Cola. She never replaced it, because it reminded her of everything she had begun with what looked like a moment of disgrace. Her phone buzzed. A message, unknown number, no profile photo, just a few lines written with all the sincerity of a young heart. "Ms. Kayla, I'm Jada, 14, from Jackson, Mississippi. I just received a laptop scholarship from your program. I never thought someone like me would get a chance. But I saw today's video, and I want you to know, I won't let you down." Kayla sat still. The screen reflected her eyes, tired but burning with renewal. She didn't reply right away. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the rushing crowds below. They had no idea that up here on the top floor, a woman once dismissed was quietly transforming the life chances of thousands, not by retaliation, but by reconstruction. Then she picked up her phone and typed back to Jada. "You don't have to do anything not to disappoint me, Jada. You must keep believing in your worth, even when the world hasn't seen it yet. Because once a girl was standing soaked in a room where the whole company turned its back on her, she chose not to walk away." Kayla hit send, then sat back at her desk. On her laptop screen, a new title appeared: "Global Campaign 1 Million Opportunities, from Places No One Looks." Below it, the signature is already typed: Kayla Morgan Blake, founder, the Kayla Morgan Initiative, architect of Equihire, Nobel laureate, Tech for Justice and Just, a girl who refused to shrink to fit their boxes. Outside, winter began to settle over the city, but inside something had long since bloomed from a drop of Coca-Cola that seemed like an ending, but turned out to be the first drop watering a revolution.